Hi, it's Thursday, October 9th, Friday the 10th in Japan, and we have a few systems active across the tropics today. We've got Tropical Storm Jerry passing very close to the Leeward Islands tonight. We'll bring some tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall over the next day to those islands, and could become a hurricane as it passes generally southeast of Bermuda, recurving into the open Atlantic. We've also got a couple systems in the eastern Pacific. We've got Tropical Storm Raymond, which is formed today just south of Mexico. Main issue with this system will be rainfall across South Mexico and into northwestern parts of Mexico as it begins to turn to the north towards this weekend and into early next week. In same case with Priscilla, as this one pushes up this weekend, could lead to some significant flooding issues in northwest Mexico and the southwest US this weekend. And finally, in the Western Pacific, we've got Tropical Storm Nakri just south of Japan. And we're actually going to start with this system as it could impact Japan as it brushes the coast as a typhoon in all likelihood for the next couple of days. And so far, the system has been very sheared for the past couple of days. If we look at the bigger view across this part of the Pacific, pay attention to the northeastern corner of this loop. You'll see Typhoon Halong, which passed in a similar fashion close to Japan for the past couple of days. But this is now quickly racing off into the open North Pacific, and that has been shearing Nakri so far. But now that the system is exiting the scene very fast, the wind shear is also decreasing very fast. And so what we'll likely see today is a phase of rebounding with the system, seeing this low-level center get covered by convection, and that will lead to the system eventually intensifying, likely into a typhoon as it passes very close to Japan throughout this weekend and into early parts of next week. This is a GFS out to Sunday morning local time, and you can see this by this point. The area of low pressure here is Nakri, and you can see it's very close to the south coast of Japan. Now, some good news, very similarly to Halong, is that the system will be moving pretty fast, especially once it gets up to this jet stream. So it's not going to be a long duration event, but it could get close enough to the coast to bring some tropical storm force winds to the coast as it intensifies, as this jet will likely allow the system to intensify at a greater pace. We have, the next day or two for the system to recuperate itself and be ready for this jet interaction to foster intensification up until shear gets too much for the system. And that's when models generally show the system peaking out, is when it's just south of Japan, south of Tokyo to be more specific. And you'll see that here on the GFS, that red number bottoms out at around 976 millibars. That would be a typhoon, maybe getting towards category 2 intensity, as this is a little bit of a smaller storm. And that small storm, the small size of the storm may also go in our favor. Unlike Halong, this is not going to be a very large hurricane or typhoon in this case. So if it does pass well to the south, we may not get too much winds with this. But if it passes very close, we could get some tropical storm force winds, and that is a possibility for the next few days as this makes it recurve into the open North Pacific. And you can see that highlighted here in the Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecast, gradually intensifying for the next day or so as it recuperates itself from the shear, gets itself geared up for the jet interaction, and then we see a more significant phase of intensification into something more of a strong typhoon just south of Tokyo before it weakens into the open North Pacific. And in a similar fashion as well to Halong, the system will be racing away, so you can see that by the 14th, it's now well east of you all. And behind this, we don't have another signal to watch for Japan. It looks like things do quiet down after Nakri. Okay, now moving to the Eastern Pacific, we've got a couple of rainmakers here to talk about for Mexico and the southwestern U.S. as well. We'll first talk about Priscilla, still weakening just off the west coast of the Baja California Peninsula. The system peaked near a major hurricane a couple of days ago, but has been moving over cooler waters for the past couple of days, and that has caused the system to decay gradually over the past couple of days. And now the system is not forecast to make landfall as a TC in western Mexico, but the remnant moisture with the system will still likely get dragged up as it begins to move north into the continent. And that will likely lead to some significant rainfall for northwest Mexico and southwest US. This is the mid-level relative humidity plot showing you the available moisture in the atmosphere, and the green here is basically just showing you that there's a lot more moisture available to precipitate. So if you have more green here, you have more precipitation over an area. So as the system here, you can see out to tomorrow morning is now coming ashore into Baja California. You'll see the stream of green get pushed up into the northwest Mexico and the Four Corners region of the US. And that may lead to some very heavy rainfall totals relatively for the desert region. And we could see some totals exceeding 2 inches, which may not sound like too much, but for desert regions, that's a lot. And that could easily lead to a lot of flooding issues across these areas over the next couple of days. And for that reason, we have a moderate risk in place from the Weather Prediction Center across north central Arizona. This might get extended a little bit more in future outlooks, but you can see aside from that, we've got a broad risk here, a slight risk across the adjacent states. And if this did extend into Mexico, that would also show that there, as there is a risk of flooding across really this entire region as all that moisture pushes in. And that will likely be the first batch of moisture, as we have Tropical Storm Raymond, which has just formed just south of Mexico today. Now, speaking primarily for the south coast of Mexico, the good news is that this system is not forecast to intensify all too much. The system is pretty broad and it's moving at a pretty brisk pace off to the west-northwest, so that's not going to allow it a lot of time to organize itself to intensify really much at all. But as it passes by the next few days, we could have some tropical storm force winds across that south coast, and for that reason we do have tropical storm warnings in blue for that reason. But you can see that general forecast briskly moving off to the west-northwest, remaining a weak tropical storm as it does so, and then weakening, and it may not even make it as a tropical storm to the Baja California Peninsula. But you'll see a very similar turn to the north that Priscilla is making, and the remnant moisture will be pushing into northwest Mexico, and again could move to the southwest US, and that could prolong some of the rainfall threat that we have across those regions, and could lead to some even more flooding issues there as that one pushes in. But after these two systems, we've got a bit of a quieter period in the Eastern Pacific. We don't have any areas of interest after these two, so a little bit of a quieter phase here in the Eastern Pacific, which will likely take because we've had a very active past several weeks in the Eastern Pacific, and Pacific as a whole, really, for that. Okay, now moving finally into the Atlantic, as we have two systems here to talk about. I didn't mention at the beginning, but we do have a little invest sitting here in the far North Atlantic that I'll briefly mention here. If we take a close look at this, this is a non-tropical area of low pressure that is trying to acquire subtropical characteristics. And you might ask, well, what is a subtropical cyclone? That is a system that is benefiting from tropical and non-tropical processes. For example, the tropical process is this convection that you're seeing in green here flare up around the center of the storm. That's a tropical process taking place because it's lofting up moisture from the ocean surface into the atmosphere, and it's convecting through the convective process. But now the system is over some pretty cold waters. It's over waters that are about 20 degrees Celsius, and generally for TCs you need about 26 degrees Celsius waters. And that's where the non-tropical part of this comes in. If we look at water vapor imagery, normally for a tropical cyclone, you would expect to see clockwise flow aloft, denoting an area of high pressure. But instead, we have counterclockwise flow, denoting an upper level low that the system is directly embedded underneath. And these upper lows are cold cores. So there's colder air aloft with not as warm as, say, the tropics, but warmer air at the surface. So there's a greater lapse rate there. So the air rises through the column, and that causes this convective process to occur. And so that's the two processes between the tropical and non-tropical aspects that allows these systems to form, even in pretty marginal sea surface temperatures. And this is not really going to impact anybody. You can see the Azores here just southeast of it, but it's very small and not impacting those islands. It's going to race off to the far North Atlantic tomorrow, and that will mark the end of its development time if it hasn't developed by that point. But if it keeps up its trends tonight, we could see this become a brief subtropical storm, and the NHC has marked this with a 40% chance of development this afternoon. And we may see them start advisories on this tonight or early tomorrow if it sustains its convective look right now. But zooming back out, we've got the main thing, which is Tropical Storm Jerry passing very close to the Leeward Islands. And this system has really been disheveled for the past few days. This is the close visible loop as the sun sets over this region. And what you'll see is that the center of circulation is exposed here, running in advance in a way from the convection. And we talked about this being possible with some of the shear because we have an area of high pressure that is steering the system off to the northeast. You'll see here this clockwise flow in this part of the Atlantic, and this is a a strong area of high pressure across the eastern Atlantic. And this has been enhancing flow around Jerry for the past few days. And aloft, we have some fairly light flow aloft. The upper level environment has actually been pretty good, all things considered, for Jerry. But because you have light flow aloft and strong flow at the surface, we've had a significant speed shear. And the system has been tracking very fast for the past few days, going at forward speeds of about 20 to 25 miles per hour. And so then an effect of that is that the low level center sort of just runs ahead of the convection, and we have a very tilted structure with the low level center here, mid level center up here with all of the convection. This is not a favorable configuration for the storm to intensify. We have seen the system get near hurricane intensity at times, but that's not really fully from convective processes. It's more so the gradient between the storm and the ridge off to the east. Now, the good news with the track that we're seeing today, you'll see the center is going northeast of the Leeward Islands. We talked about a couple of days ago how the wind field will likely be very asymmetric, and we can see this very clearly if we look at the recon data from earlier this afternoon. You can see the very strong tropical storm force winds, again, at times near hurricane force, that the recon plane measured in this eastern side. That's because you have a tight pressure gradient between the low pressure here and the high pressure off to the northeast. But if you look off towards the southwest, we've got very weak winds overall. And this is probably the best case scenario that we could have had for Jerry for these islands, as the weakest side is going over these islands. Now, we aren't going to get fully out of the way with no impact. So you can see all this convection on the south side is going to come over these islands overnight tonight. And so that may lead to some gusts to tropical storm force and heavy rainfall, which for some of these high mountainous areas especially could lead to some flooding issues into the day on Friday. Now, beyond this, it'll be pushing into the central Atlantic, where the environment may get a little bit better. We will still have the stronger flow of the surface from this ridge, but it may weaken a little bit compared to where it is now. So the forward motion of the system may slow down as it begins to make its recurvature off to the northeast. And so we may still have persistent and moderate shear, but overall the shear magnitude will be much less than it is today. And that may allow the system an opportunity to restack itself, get its low level center back underneath of all this convection, and intensify maybe into a hurricane. Maybe not, though. We got to see how it goes, because there will still be, like I mentioned, that shear, and there also may be some dry air on the west side, which could get entrained through that wind shear. And so that may keep the system rather weak. We're not expecting a very strong hurricane out of this. At most, I think the current Hurricane Center forecast is 85 miles per hour. And from what I've seen on models, that may be a little bit generous. But we'll see what Jerry does. But the most important thing is the impacts to Bermuda are not expected to be all too significant. The biggest risk that you may feel, at least for now in the forecast, is high surf, but you're pretty used to that because we've had a lot of hurricanes pass very close to the island this hurricane season. And the general model expectation that the system is going to be recurving before it gets close to the island. Now, it does get a little bit uncomfortably close to the island here in this model forecast. We will continue to watch it over the next few days, see if it does trend further north. But you'll see that the reason it's being picked up is this trough coming into the eastern Atlantic. And this is going to be quickly picking it up and turning it into a non-tropical system in the far North Atlantic. And that will be pretty much the end of Jerry after that. And so putting it all together, here's the forecast cone from the Hurricane Center. And you can see tropical storm watches and warnings for the Leeward Islands, because we could have some tropical storm impacts overnight tonight and into the day on Friday. But you see by Friday afternoon and Friday evening, the system is now clearing out and beginning to intensify again as that shear lowers, generally staying southeast of Bermuda, though, as it begins to make that turn into the far North Atlantic. And the final graphic I'll show you is the rainfall forecast in the Leeward Islands. The center of the storm has trended a little bit southwest since my video a couple of days ago, so we have had some increase in the rainfall forecast for particularly Barbuda and Antigua. We could see some localized totals of 100 to 150 millimeters there, but across the Leewards, a general expectation of 50 to 100 millimeters across these islands can be expected throughout the day. Tonight, or the night tonight into the day on Friday as it passes through. And especially for some of these mountainous terrains in these islands, we could have some localized flooding issues take place. But beyond, Friday evening, the system will be clearing out, so all the rainfall will be done. And behind Jerry, we don't have too many prevalent Areas of interest. Typically, this time of year, the tropical wave season is beginning to shut down. Models are trying to hint at something else trying to form, but that's in long range. We'll see what happens. And it does look like across the globe, hopefully, we are going into a bit of a quieter phase of tropics until it ramps up again, inevitably, likely in later October. That's all that I've got for today. Stay safe in the areas that are being impacted by all these storms over the next few days. That's all that I've got for now. Thanks for watching.